Welcome to Hellbilly, the darker side of Appalachia. Just a friendly reminder not to whistle, sing, or scream into the darkness because you might find yourself surrounded by skinwalkers or someone who might be there to steal your catalytic converter or some copper wire. Either way, it won't be pleasant. I apologize for the delay. Again, in another episode, my producer and I were involved in a car accident where a deer missile hit the car while we were driving home for dinner. Wasn't fun by any stretch of the imagination. I ended up standing in the middle of the road crying as the deer pulled itself into the woods that aren't woods. It was more like a hedgerow because I no longer live in Central Appalachia. And I miss Central Appalachia because despite the fact that I grew up in Central Appalachia, that never happened to me, ever. It was only when I moved to Indiana that occurred. And I spent the entire night in the ER waiting on a CT scan to see if I had internal bleeding and perhaps some fractures in my spine. I do not, or did not's the appropriate vernacular, have internal bleeding or spinal fractures. I just had an incredibly sprained back muscle, or all of the muscles from my midsection, and probably a bruised spine. Suffice it to say, I am okay.
That rhymes.
I don't know about the deer, though. Rip deer, most likely. I still don't know where the fuck the deer came from. Like, literally, it's flat here. It's like it came out of some backroom portal, some liminal space, right into the side of the car. But whatever. Onward and upward, my friends. Onward and upward. Tonight on Hellbilly, we are talking about something that Appalachia knows very well, but rarely talks about openly, ironically. Because I don't know about you, but you know what? If you're from Appalachia, we basically talk about everything openly. Everybody knows everybody's business there. But we don't talk about suicide openly. And it's not because people here don't care. It's not because families aren't devastated by it. None of that. I don't know. Shame. It's shame. People don't talk about it because they're ashamed of it, because of the religious connotation behind it, because of many different reasons, which we will go over. The bottom line, though, is that it doesn't get spoken about. And that creates a much larger problem. So let's do what we do best here at Hellbilly and disregard everybody's comfort and dive the fuck right on in. I am of the firm belief that if we speak about suicide more frequently, we would save more lives because people would be more apt to talk about it more openly instead of tinging it with the crayon color called shame. That's just me. That doesn't fit the culture. And if you've been following along, you know that the Appalachian culture is very much a culture of silence. What happens in the family stays in the family. So if somebody in the family commits suicide, they died suddenly in the obituary. If somebody in the family commits suicide, they died peacefully, even if they didn't. And I'm not saying that you should read every obituary with those particular phrases as a suicide, but those terms have been used frequently to gloss over the fact that the person in question did in fact unalive themselves, as opposed to saying that their loved one could not or did not want to continue the pressure that it takes to remain alive sometimes, and saw no other escape in that moment than to shuffle off this mortal coil. So our culture is one that says, you know what? Hey, don't talk about it. Carry it quietly. Put your head down. Go to work. Take care of your family. Do what you're supposed to do. If you're struggling, you keep it to yourself. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I hate bootstraps. I really do. I know what they are. I just hate them. The bootstrap method does not work. Now I'm going off on a tangent. Sorry. It doesn't work. And people end up somehow getting lost in the miasma of pain and suffering. And so much more occurs than just addiction. And in this episode, we're talking about another consequence of the culture of silence, the culture of suck it up cupcake, the culture of bootstrap method, the culture of unaliving. And yeah, I know it happens everywhere, but we're not talking about everywhere. we're talking about here. Let's begin with my hometown. The Tri-Cities region being, as you know, a pretty consistent listener, but for those of you who aren't, hi, welcome. I'm Kel. I'm a therapist. Glad you're here. Glad to have you. Hope you come back. The Tri-Cities region is where I'm from, and it consists of Northeast Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee, Johnson City, Kingsport, surrounding areas. Moving forward, the Tri-Cities region and surrounding Appalachian counties has struggled with suicide rates that consistently rival or exceed national averages. You know, when I read that, I was shook. And then I wasn't. And I thought, well, maybe there was an earthquake underneath me. And then I remembered that where I'm currently residing doesn't really have earthquakes. We have tornadoes and it's pretty sunny outside. So kind of led me to believe that I was like, wow, man, that's intense. It rivals or exceeds national averages. And to top it off, the cherry on top of that is that people assume it's mental illness that causes that. And sure it does. Yeah, no, that's part of it. One thing that people forget is suicide is a multifaceted choice. It's not caused by just one thing. It's not caused just by mental illness. It's not caused just by addiction. It's not caused just by poverty. It's death by 1,000 cuts that occurs across time. It's a factory that closed 20 years ago, generational. It's a coal job that disappeared years ago. Or to you, you lost your job. It's a back injury that turned into pain pill prescription that turned into a pain pill addiction. My dog just said hallelujah. And the loss of a job turns into the loss of a marriage, turns into a custody battle over children, or a loss of a home, a loss of a way of life, and the shame and silence that's bred into the culture that keeps people from asking for help. Help! I need somebody. Help! Not just anybody. You know, we Appalachians, we've always had such a complicated relationship with asking for help, man. We've had such a complicated relationship with suffering, even though that doesn't necessarily make sense because suffering is what we were built on, truly. But I guess it could be both. Two things can be true at the same time. Remember that, folks. Two things or three things, multiple things can be true at the same time. All or nothing is not the way to go all the time. Gonna leave that there. Marinate. Roll around in that knowledge. Anyway, this is a region that was built by people who survived war, poverty, natural disasters, dangerous labor, generations of hardships. Like, come on, man. We survived a lot. We're still surviving it. Still, to this day, surviving it. We keep going. Resilience is part of our culture. It's one of the things that I think that when people talk about us and they talk about us in a good light, they point out that we are resilient. Well, hell yeah, we are. Look at what we've been through. Look at what we've come through. We're still here. We're still gonna be here. That's a big deal. But we could be here in better ways, stronger ways, if we addressed the silent problems. So what we're looking at for perspective, here are some quotes that are commonly heard. Well, Jimmy's just going through a rough patch. Becky's being dramatic. I don't know. Bobby just needs to toughen up. I don't know, y'all. Everybody gets depressed. That was a smoker for you. Actually, no, that was me. I just had to cough. She's too sensitive. That Lisa. And sometimes those phrases become barriers. They gatekeep help and they prevent people from what they need. And one of the biggest obstacles, I would say, in Central Appalachia that we are still trying to overcome as a community, a whole community, is mental health stigma because it looks different for everyone. And I'll be honest with you, as a therapist and a student of psychology and human behavior, there are patterns. I am neurodivergent. I'm big on pattern recognition. And there are a lot of things that are very similar in the way that these things present. But each person has their own individuality in expression. That being said, depression does not always look like sadness. It looks like anger at times, like drinking, like isolation and disappearing from the people you love, like sleeping all the time. Sometimes PTSD doesn't look like flashbacks. Sometimes it looks like being cold and distant. Sometimes it looks like dissociation, where you just stare into a wall for hours, or you listen and don't hear a word that someone is saying, even though you look like you're paying attention. Sometimes it looks like standing at a gas pump, pumping your gas, and you hear a siren, and the next thing you know, your gas is overflowing because you checked out. Panic and anxiety doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism, control, irritability, constant worry, checking and rechecking and checking and rechecking and reassurance seeking, hiding from your parents in a bathroom when you're in middle school because you made a B instead of an A. People don't always see this because the symptoms are misunderstood because, you know what? We think we have all the answers. The DSM-5 is a guideline to a diagnosis. The people who work in the field use that guideline to diagnose, to provide evidence to the insurance companies for payment, and to give ourselves an understanding. And then, if we are doing our jobs, we look at the individual and how it presents in their lives, and we go from there to build a treatment plan that helps the person get better. But when these symptoms are misunderstood, people don't get the treatment that they truly need and truly deserve. Instead, they get labels like lazy, mean, crazy. Crazy is one of my favorites. Difficult is one of my favorites. Oh my God. She's difficult. Hysterical. Lord Jesus. Weak. Weak is another one of my favorites. I am so weak. Insert whatever there. You've probably heard it. You've probably been on the wrong end of one of these things. I'm sure you have your own word to add there. Adjective, adverb, whatever you want to call it. Now let's talk about how addiction plays a role in this. And again, hi, new listeners. There are other episodes on addiction, so if you want, you can go back and listen. Or if you don't, you can keep going. It's fine. If you've listened to previous episodes, though, you already know that addiction and Appalachia are locked in this brutal love embrace and dance, and have been for decades. It's like this taboo tango where there is no resolution. It's just passion and pain. Opiates devastated this region. Meth came in, changed everything, destroyed sleep. God, I love sleep, by the way. Who else loves sleep? Can I get a holla? Amen. Thank you. Increased impulsivity, paranoia, deepened depression because meth takes all of your dopamine. And then when you're off of it, the dopamine is gone and you're like, good. Where's my happy? Where's my joy? Where's Marie Kondo when I need her? It created a level of hopelessness that became so dangerous. And since we're talking about suicide, this is important. So for many of the families in the Tri-Cities, suicide and addiction were not separate issues. They still aren't separate issues. In fact, I think this is across the board, but again, I'm not talking about across the board, so we're just going to single it out. Hashtag Team No Sleep is a thing. And whenever I'm on Facebook or something else and I see hashtag Team No Sleep, I'm like, bitch, why don't you just stop it and say, I'm a meth addict? I get it. You putting it out there. You just hiding it, thinking you're clever, but you ain't, because we all know you on meth for multiple reasons. But okay, no judgment, just saying. You ain't fooling anybody, sis or bro. It's all the same story, and it all goes together, and it all points back to generational trauma. There's a thing that we talk about a lot in therapy, and that's generational trauma. Trauma that is passed down through generations. For those that don't know, it's the same shit that gets passed down from one generation to the next. It's learned, it's taught, and it's passed down. Every Appalachian has their own story. So, for instance, Grandpa comes back for more different, or doesn't come back for more at all. There's that. Uncle drinks himself to death. Grandmother bears children, and it's never spoken about again. Mother bears children, it's never spoken about again. Domestic violence everybody knows about, but nobody discusses. They come to the family reunion wearing sunglasses, say they tripped and fell down the stairs into the door and hit the knob or whatever. I'm not being droll. I'm being honest. Sexual abuse that became family secrets. Addiction that travels through generations like blood in your veins. Here's the kicker, y'all. Trauma doesn't disappear because nobody pays attention to it. In fact, it's like a petri dish for it. It grows. It's like bacteria in a petri dish. If we don't pay attention to it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It changes shape, and everybody pays the bill. Everybody pays that tab in some way, shape, or form. So I go back to what I said earlier, is that suicide is not just about mental health. It is multifaceted. It's economic, it's healthcare, it's addiction, it's trauma, it's community. It's a human fucking problem, because behind every statistic, every number is a person. A son, a daughter, a husband, a wife, a friend, a coworker, a niece, a nephew, somebody's someone, a you. It could be you. Somebody whose absence left or will leave a permanent hole in the lives around them. One thing I know for sure is that the people who have completed suicide or who have attempted usually aren't trying to die. That's not ultimately the end result. They're just trying to end their suffering. If you want to take a nihilistic or existential or both perspective on it, it's not about death. It's about the end of suffering. And to live is to suffer, according to those perspectives. A gentleman, Robert Solero, wrote a book entitled Trauma and Human Existence. And from Stolero's book, we have learned a considerable amount on how trauma affects us in multiple ways. And my treatment of trauma comes from a foundational perspective of his book. We live in space that perpetuates a lot of things, but it perpetuates suffering as well. And when we talk about trauma, we talk about suffering. And when we are suffering through trauma, we are not inherently focusing on flowers and happiness and joy. And when that suffering feels endless, death does or can look like the only exit. And in those moments, that can look fantastic. It can look like flowers and joy. And that might sound very strange to a lot of people, but I'm asking you to hang in there with me right now and hear me, because this might be a way for you to connect with someone in your life that you can help. Just because you don't understand it and have never been there doesn't mean that you can't learn. Imagine being at the bottom of a well and there's no ladder up, and there's no one around to give you that ladder. And though people try, the ladders that they give don't actually reach you. And the only thing that you can find at the bottom of that well is a knife. It's that kind of perspective. Now, imagine building a ladder that reaches down into that well, and instead of just rolling it down in there, you climb down into that well with them, and you don't say anything. You just sit there with them. And there's a very good video about empathy, because that's what this is, by Brene Brown on YouTube. All you have to do is search Brene Brown, YouTube, empathy, all of that, because that's what we're talking about right now. It's not about forcing someone out of where they're at. It's about connection. It's not about grabbing my ladder. It's about, I see you where you're at. I will climb down in there with you. I won't enable you. I won't take on your pain, but I will sit there with you. Connection matters. Treatment matters. And that's why talking about these issues matters. But you can't force someone to do that. They have to feel safe enough to open up. So I'm going to leave it here for tonight, because I think that this is a good place to stop. We're going to continue this series for a few episodes, and then we're going to pause for a brief break and start season 2. I'm not sure when that will be. Probably maybe 2 or 3 episodes after this. We'll play it by ear. But I want you to remember something. Silence never cures trauma. The cure for trauma is talking and empathy. So I'd like to thank you for sitting with me a spell as we talked about suicide in Central Appalachia and just in general. Next session. Now I really sound like a therapist. Next episode, I'm going to give you some statistics about cohorts of people who are at risk for suicide There's going to be a lot of numbers, so stick with me, okay? But I think that it's going to be very enlightening. I probably will have some kind of sarcastic quips to throw in there. One thing I'd like you to remember, though, as always, is that we are never afraid of the dark. We're afraid of what's in it, but we're also afraid of the dark that's inside ourselves. This has been a Strummer's Mom production. Thanks, Frank.